I don't think they. Oh, hi. Can you hear me? Okay. This is a very interesting setup. It's so loud, so hopefully you guys can hear me. If you can't, just make some movement so I know that you can't hear me. It's also very loud for me, but anyways, okay. Hi everyone, I'm Hazal. I'm the Senior Director of Data at Wise. As soon as I entered the conference, I've noticed how expansive it is. You always forget, so thanks so much for being here and choosing to listen to this talk. In the next 20 minutes or so, I'll be talking about what it means to really have a data-driven organization, unlocking decision-making through data. There are a ton of presentations today using a lot of the hot words or buzzwordy words around AI, talking about really complicated, sophisticated pieces of analyses. This topic is actually not about that at all. If you've been to any of the previous talks that I've given, I'm a huge fan of simplicity, so we will really just be talking about what it means to really find the right problems to solve and use data to find the right problems for your organization. So hopefully we have a fun 20 minutes and then we'll have some Q&A if we can hear each other. I'll try to answer your questions. So a little bit about me. I studied math, economics, and psychology, thinking I would do something like behavioral economics, and then fell into a very similar domain, data, specifically in the product world. I have a pretty linear career in data. I started as an individual contributor, did a program manager role, a technical program manager role, moved to people management, and in the last almost 5 years or so actually now, I've been helping build out the analytics team at Wise. So this is the part that I think is quite critical to discuss, and it's the heart of a lot of the learnings that I want to share with you guys. When I joined Wise, it was always a very data-driven company, very data-loving company with a lot of data people in it. But there wasn't much of a data strategy behind how that analytics guild was put together. Analysts reported into product managers. They didn't really have a vision for how to scale the data or the analytics team. Our VP of data was hired only a couple of months before me to help build out what that function could look like at Wise, and I was hired pretty soon after that to help scale the team. At the time, Wise was growing quite rapidly. We didn't really have a lot of budget constraints, which means that we had a lot of money that we could use to invest into the organization. When you find yourself in a situation like that, it's really easy to say, okay, we will just hire a bunch of data people, we will invest in a bunch of tools, and then hope that that momentum solves the problems that we actually care about. And you would be surprised, as nonsensical as that sounds, how many organizations actually end up doing that. And then you end up in a situation where there are quarterly reorgs, layoffs, and things like that. And I had experienced some of that in my past experiences, and I didn't want to have that happen at Wise. So when I started building out the team, I really had to spend a lot of time for myself to focus on these 4 things. Again, none of this is complicated, none of it is, hopefully most of it is common sense, but I really wanted to be able to articulate the vision and the mission for my team. So this group of people that I have hired underneath me, what is the problem that they're solving? What is the unique purpose for why this group of people exists? The second one was the operational model. So you can have a centralized model, an embedded model. Each of them have their, or hybrids, they have their pluses and minuses, but we really wanted the work of the analytics team to be as contextual as possible. So spending a little bit time on how we want to have that operational, organizational engagement was really important. The third bit was people. When you set up an organization that has a really clear mission statement and you want them to operate in a certain way, you want to make sure that you hire the right people with the right values. So that's where the people and the values really come into play. And what I really mean is you want to hire people that have a skin in the game, right? They care about the problems that they're solving. They want to make an impact on the product. That all sounds nice. It's hard to assess that in an interview process. But ultimately, what you don't want to have is just a bunch of people who are technical wizards or people who can do really complicated, beautiful pieces pieces of analyses, but they don't really always care about the outcome. It's obviously an oversimplification, but if that is one end of the spectrum, you want to avoid that as much as possible and have people who want their work to be as contextual as possible. The reason why I share these principles is because not everybody, of course, has an opportunity to come in and build an organization from scratch. There is a huge amount of change management in most cases because you're embedding or inheriting a culture that already exists, or you're inheriting a way of working that already exists. But I think it's really worth reiterating what foundational principles should really look like when you are setting up an organization that you want to get as much value out of as possible. So among these four things, the piece that I'm going to spend the most of my time on is really around this vision and mission. And this is the part where, again, as simple as it sounds, where a lot of people make a lot of mistakes. You would be surprised by how not logical we are as human beings, and we like to jump to conclusions based on initial pieces of evidence that we prove to ourselves is the cause of the problem that we're looking at. So being able to really clearly articulate for an organization where the biggest problems are, what are the decisions that they need to be able to make that they cannot make today, what are the problems that they need to be able to solve that they don't have the right structure to be able to solve. Being able to get to that clarity is the most difficult part. It's not really the size of your analytics organization or the sophistication of your analytics infrastructure. It's actually not being able to answer that question that causes a lot of data initiatives or analytics initiatives to fall flat. So we had to spend a lot of time actually aligning with the product team, with the business leadership, engineering team around these problems and try to build the analytics org around them. So when you do this exercise, you realize, as much as everybody loves using the word data-driven and every company wants to be a data-driven company, when we talk about being data-driven, it's not really this external strategy or this concept that a consultant has come up with that you just unpluck from air and apply to your organization. It's really a way of working, right? It's understanding that data is literally anything and everything your organization produces, anything and everything that your customers do, your business does, and being able to connect the questions that you're trying to answer to that pieces of evidence. And trying to work through a very fine connection between the problems and the solutions. So to me, when we talk about having data in the center of our product innovation or our growth or our decision making, it's really around seeing data as that linkage between very clearly articulated problems and hopefully eloquently and elegantly executed solutions. So if there are any product managers in the room, none of this will be surprising. It's being able to do this and using data to be able to do this, right? Get really clear on the problems, develop the right solutions for the problems that you've identified, hopefully build and create a good solution, and then be able to look back on whether you achieved the outcomes that you are hoping for. The reason why I outlined this is because data is very foundational to this line of thinking, right? So for you to be able to identify the problems that were worth solving, the solutions that you've created and their efficiency, you need to be able to look at numbers and metrics to be able to understand whether you solved the right things and whether the solution that you've created was the right solution. So this is where your KPI structure or your metrics really come into play. So I spent the first few minutes talking about how it's really critical for an organization to be clear on their problems. You structure your organization around the problems that you want to solve, and then you want to have a metrics infrastructure around those problems, right? So you want to be able to assess when you are making a progress or how much progress you're making, and it needs to be following a certain deductive reasoning, and it needs to have the main metrics that you care about. It needs to have clearly the levers that you're pulling to pull those metrics, and you need to understand the relationship between each of those metrics. So if I'm saying that, this piece of work that we're working on is going to really help reduce our customer support tickets, that in and of itself is likely not the goal. What we are trying to do is potentially save on cost, or what we are trying to reduce is actually the number of customer support outreaches that we're getting, because we want our customers to experience as little friction as possible, which then we should have an impact on some of our churn rates, how much volume or how much value that they're generating on our platform, etc. It needs to link to other things, and you need to be able to visualize that and have the analytics team and the structure to be able to do that kind of retro. So this is an example of what a metrics tree can look like. One of our partners, Mixpanel, has built a metrics tree infrastructure, a capability that makes this visualization quite easy. A lot of you guys have your own ways of visualizing your metric trees or your KPI trees. Whatever means of visualization that you have, or whatever means of reporting that you guys have, what ultimately matters is that you follow that deductive reasoning, right? Being able to connect the metrics that you're moving to the next layer, so that you can actually ultimately assess for yourself whether you are effectively solving the problems that really matter for your organization. And if you are unable to follow that logical lineage of metrics, then you have a really hard time answering whether you've solved the problems that you've set out to solve. I'll give a really quick example of where this could actually fall flat, and this actually isn't even necessarily related to where specific metrics have gone wrong, but I want to give a very simple example of how our logical thinking, in the absence of very clear metric evidence, can lead to the wrong outcomes. A couple of years ago, we were transitioning from primarily being a remittance product into a full account proposition. And so, a lot of Wise customers come to us to send money overseas. We've got a lot of loyal, frequent send users, so remittance customers. And we launched a card that those customers can use overseas when they're traveling for the same cross-border use case. And we saw that the adoption of the card was really low, which we had assumed when we created the cards, that everybody would be, rushing to get this product, because we thought that it was such a valuable product and it was the same customer group that would benefit from this product. We saw that the adoption was really low. The logical the intuition that the product team had, and I think to a certain extent rightfully so, was, well, surely this is a really valuable product. If the customers aren't using it, maybe they just don't know that they can use it, or there was a small fee associated with getting the card. Maybe that's the thing that's causing the friction. But it wasn't truly a data-driven decision. It wasn't really metrics-led. So based on that intuition, what the team did was to send out a bunch of free cards to our loyal customers and hope that that solves the problem, because they didn't have to pay for the cards, and it was obviously available to them because we just mailed it to them. That didn't work, as shocking as it might be, because we had completely missed the point of who the ideal customer base for the cards were, right? We didn't actually look into the data. We didn't actually talk to the customers. We just made some intuitive decisions around what we thought the problem was, and we solved it in the way that we knew how. The reason why I shared this is because this is a really easy trap for a lot of people, as brilliant as they are, to fall into. So you really need to be able to have a really logical framework behind you to be able to sense check you on the decisions that you're getting wrong. And in the absence of that, we all make these intuition mistakes. So I want to come back here. The reason why I gave you the visualization of the metric trees, or talked about this silly example of where we've gotten something wrong based on an intuition, it's ultimately coming back to this problem solution thing, which now I've said 100 times, but that is really the only thing I want you guys to take away. An analytics team is as valuable as the the retrospective learning it's helping you guys have on these two things, right? And you can apply that to a product setting, you can apply it to a business setting. At the end of the day, when you strip out all the fancy words, there are problems your organizations need to solve, and you come up with a solution for it. When something doesn't work, something has gone wrong in one of these. Either you found the wrong problem, you underestimated its complexity, you underestimated why it was happening, you underestimated who it was impacting, or you got it wrong. Or you found the right problem, it was a perfectly articulated problem, and you just solved it primitively, or you just came up with the wrong solution. It's somewhere in between these two that you've gone wrong, right? You need to be able to understand where the mistake happened, and if you set up your organization in a way that can help you get this understanding, which is actually not very difficult to get, then you can really easily unblock yourself in a lot of the decisions that you're trying to make for your organization. So what do you need for this? Again, I've mentioned at the beginning, we live in a world where, and I talk about this myself, I'm a part of conversations related to these things. There are a ton of really, really exciting developments happening in the data world, specifically around AI, and I would never underestimate the importance of that. But when we talk about these things, we really miss the point of the simple things that are really easy, that are really important to get right, but really easy to get wrong. So I think in order for really any organization to have as much of a strategic analytical presence as possible, you need to be able to hopefully resonate and internalize some of the things that I've talked about. And for that to happen, you really don't need to start with anything massively complicated. What you really need is a simple, clean structure on your foundations, right? You need to have a data infrastructure that makes it really easy for you to access this information. This is actually quite difficult to get right. And a lot of organizations, WISE included, kind of puts that in the back burner because it's not the sexy thing to work on. You need a clear data infrastructure. You need data. You need to be able to access the data to make use of the data. If you can't do it, then that's a problem. You need consistent metrics. You should not have 100 definition of conversion, revenue, monthly new customers, which exists in any organizations. These are really easy things to solve, not sexy things to solve. Feels like a waste of time when you could be using data to find the next thing that you're going to work on, but it will give you a tremendous amount of efficiency. And you need to train your analytics team, whether they're data scientists, data analysts, business analysts, on this way of working, right? Being able to contextualize their work, always seek to answer the questions, or always seek to be clear on the questions that they're answering, being able to go back to their stakeholders and really push back on why we are doing a certain analysis, what is the value of it, and how are we going to apply it. And then think about the tools selectively that will give you as much efficiency as possible in this way of working. For us, what this also means, and this is, again, a way of working that I feel really strongly about, I mentioned the word contextualizing many times. To us, what this means is from creating data pipelines to setting the KPI trees, the metric trees, owning the experimentation and the results of it, and also doing the retros around the problems and the solutions that I've talked about is a really critical responsibility of the analytics team. They are quite generalists in that way. Again, I understand not every organization would be set up in this way, or it's easy for every organization to get set up in this way, but this is a way of working that we should all aspire to, because it adds a lot of color and depth to the work that your team is doing, and they can very strategically challenge the decisions that are being made across the organization. So just to summarize, there are a couple of takeaways if you haven't gathered from the many repetitive words that I've used, right? If you want to have data in the front and center of your decision-making process, if you want to have truly a data-driven organization, you need to start with the right foundations, and that's data plus people and your ways of working. It's thinking about the problems, it's thinking about the people who will solve them, and it's thinking about the way that you structure that operational model in a way that makes that as efficient as possible. Aligning on problems, like I said, contextualizing work, and then having a data framework, whether that's the KPI trees that you have, not whether actually, you need to have a KPI tree, you need to have a metric structure behind you that keeps you accountable on the problems that you're solving, and then you need to go back on your hypotheses and say, okay, I thought that I was going to move this metric by this much. Did I actually do it? Did it have the effect on the one level up? And then ultimately your North Star metrics. If you're not doing that regularly, you're just shipping and not really looking back and learning from potentially the mistakes that you've made, and we all make mistakes. Obviously make a habit of sharing the learnings as you go through this retroactive exercise. And again, the main takeaway for me is sometimes simple and targeted, simple and intentional is way better than sophisticated and complicated. Yeah. So I'll end with, just as I mentioned, Mixpanel, which is one of our core partners on the front-end tracking side, has launched a new capability around the metric trees. If this is not something that you guys have already in your organizations, I think there are a lot of Mixpanel people around you and a booth somewhere. Please go find them and talk to them. But regardless of the solution that you use, it's really important to have the backing of, again, a metrics framework around the problems, which I've now said 100 times. And that's the thing that's going to keep you really accountable and moving forward on the goals that you have for your company. Cool. I've been given a 10-minute mark, which means it's Q&A time. That's it from me. Any questions that you guys have?
Hi, can you? Yeah. Thank you for your talk. It was really refreshing to hear someone advocate for simplicity in the midst of all the cutting edge stuff. My question is about engagement. So building like a data-driven, culture at Wise, how did you manage to, turn the people who were the least engaged with data in their day-to-day role, or like the least willing to, let data drive what they do? Because I've seen a lot of that, and that's something that always keeps coming back, even when it's solved. Sort of, it reverses sometimes.
Yeah, it's a pretty common question you get. Common question I get. I have to be honest and say that I had to do very little convincing on the value of data. I think at Wise, it was already a company that valued data in its decision making. Again, whether how thoughtfully that was laid out initially is open to debate, but they wanted as many numbers as possible. I think the challenge that I had was making sure that they didn't use data selectively, and they didn't choose data that served their hypotheses. And again, the way that I typically engage with these conversations is actually not about talking about data. The moment you start talking about, we need this infrastructure because we have all these like data pipelining issues, or we need the A/B testing platform because we need to be able to make, run these tests as quickly as possible. Whenever you have the conversation at that level, let's say the level that the analytics team would care about, I find that you lose senior leadership because they see it as like, well, that's your problem to solve. That's not really my problem. I mean, hopefully good leadership sees that it's a joint problem, but typically there's that divide. So that's why I like anchoring it on the problems. So make it as relevant for the business as possible. So you can figure out the data challenges on your end, or like the implications of the data challenges on your end. But if you say, hey, over the last 6 months, which is something that I do very regularly, we said that we were going to launch 12 features and their expected impact was this much. I can do the retros and tell you today, for half of them, we hit a third of the impact that we were going to get. And for the other half, we were actually delayed for these reasons. These ones we couldn't even track because there were tracking issues. Our engineering team wasn't prioritizing, etc. There might be many reasons. And we weren't able to get these insights. We weren't able to understand this about the products that we've launched. If you have the conversation at that level, I find that you get a bit more buy-in because you're talking in terms that feel relevant to them, as opposed to just talking about it more specific to the data world. I don't know if that answered your question, but try to elevate the dialogue beyond the value of data and the challenges around data, and make it about the problems that they have, because they are quite related. No worries. Yeah. He's coming.
So, did you do?
I think it's off.
Oh.
Oh.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi. So, did you do retro on the card challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And what went wrong?
Sorry?
What went wrong? Why didn't
so-
work out?
Yeah, so I mean, the simple assumption was, if we make the accessibility of the card as low friction as possible, right? Remove the fees, send it to our loyal customers, that they will use it because it's a product that's in front of them. And they didn't end up using it. I think the actual card usage of the people that we had sent the card to for free was incredibly low. So then you realize really quickly, I mean, by just doing a very simple funnel analysis, you know that these people physically have access to the card. The card number is added to their accounts, and they're not activating it. They're not using it. I think the adoption was like 10%, like very, very low. So then you realize, okay, this is not actually a top of the funnel problem, in the sense that it's not that people aren't coming through the funnel. We thought that we solved that problem. It's actually a conversion problem, but it's not that they are even attempting, meaning there is a bug in the product that's preventing them from using it. They're actually not even taking the first step. So then you realize, okay, you have a pretty clear product market fit, right? They have the product, they have means to use it, they're not using it. Then you need to actually go back to the drawing board, because you created a solution for a problem that maybe didn't exist, or you created a solution for the wrong people, and you are trying to make it their problem by giving them the card to, like, as the solution that you have. So it was a very glaringly obvious problem of we solved this product for the wrong people. So we needed to actually then go back and talk to the customers, like, who actually has a use case for this feature that we've built, or for this product that we built, and then put it in front of them, and not this other customer segment that actually has no intention of using us beyond remittances.
Hiya. In terms of keeping things simple, I absolutely love that. I'm finding that with the data teams that are in the corporation that I work in, they're very sidetracked by getting new data solutions in place, and trying to keep things ticking over in a simple way becomes quite difficult. How would you go about trying to focus, or trying to get people to focus and pay attention to the simple things?
I heard maybe half of that question. Could you repeat, or just a bit louder? Sorry, it's super loud.
Yeah, how would you go about getting people to focus on simplicity, basically, rather than shiny new products?
Yeah, so I guess if I heard it right, so if you have already a lot of ongoing initiatives, let's say around, whether they're simple or not doesn't matter, but let's say you've got a lot of other ongoing initiatives and you feel like they're not focusing on the right things, how would you refocus them? Is that the question? Okay. I mean, everybody has heard this, like, it's really around your persistence around this, like, as simple as I know I feel bad saying this, but like the 5 whys, right? Like, when somebody comes to you, I'll actually take a step back. Years and years and years ago, one of probably the most helpful advice that I've gotten from my lead was around. I was in a role where we would get requests as the data team. It was a centralized data team when I was at LinkedIn. And not all of those requests really needed to be worked on, right? Some of them would take you a week to work on and produce an analysis on, and you didn't really know where that work went and why we were working on it in the first place. And my lead at the time said, every time somebody comes to you and asks you for a piece of analysis or a piece of work, it's the solution that they've created to a problem that they're trying to solve, right? That doesn't mean that that is the right solution or that's the right analysis. You need to understand it at the root cause so that you can contribute to the discussion and come up with a new way of framing the analysis, which might actually be so much more simpler. Like maybe what they really need is one metric that will get the point across, but they haven't really thought about it because it's not like their background to know it, or they don't have the means to know it. So that's usually what I do. So we still get a lot of requests from senior leadership asking for a laundry list of metrics, right? It's not uncommon, especially like last week I was working on a board paper and it's a hectic week where you're just trying to scramble as much information as possible. And you, to the extent that you can, you want to control the narrative as much as possible by just asking a bunch of questions, right? So what are we trying to articulate? What is the message that we're trying to get across? What is the main point, or what is the main takeaway? What would you want to be able to say that you cannot say? I think by just asking these why questions of like, why are we working on this, you can hopefully align with the people around you on the right piece of work to do that will give you the most elegant answer on the problem that matters. I have to say, like, when we have these conversations, none of these things are silver bullet things. Like, oh, you do it, and then all of a sudden everybody's like, wow, it's amazing. I never thought of that. Like, now I'm going to change the way that I do everything. It's about persistence, right? It's having that. And that's why I was saying it's really important to have a team around you that can do the same. Because if it's just me talking about these things, there's only so much leverage I can get out of myself. But if you build an organization that's kind of doing that, pushback on your behalf in every micro part of the business, then that's how you get to change. Hopefully that answered. Basically takes a while, Cool. All right, we're at time. All right, we're done. Thank you for coming.